where we dive deep into his life and discoveries. This narrated documentary, supported by scientific research, historical records, expert analysis, and available data, brings Galileo's legacy to life with stunning visuals. 1. Introduction to Galileo Galilei, a visionary and pioneer. Galileo Galilei was born in Pisa, Italy, on February 15, 1564, to Vincenzo and Giulia Galilei. Growing up in the midst of the Renaissance, he was surrounded by a world brimming with intellectual exploration and unprecedented scientific inquiry. The Renaissance, fueled by a revival of classical knowledge, saw the birth of modern science, and Galileo was destined to play a crucial role in this transformation. His father, a musician, was a key influence on his early life, offering both financial support and guidance, albeit with a desire for his son to pursue a career in medicine. Galileo, however, was drawn to mathematics and natural philosophy, pursuits which would eventually define his legacy as one of history's greatest scientific minds. His early exposure to the ideas of Copernicus and his training in mathematics began to plant the seeds for his later astronomical achievements. Though his early education was grounded in the traditional academic curriculum of the time, which included the study of Aristotle and Ptolemy, Galileo was never satisfied with the constraints of established doctrine. His intellectual curiosity led him to seek answers outside the classroom, and he began to question many of the accepted beliefs of the day. As he progressed through his studies, he became increasingly interested in the concepts of motion and mechanics. The rigid Aristotelian view that the natural world was governed by unchanging laws that could not be tested empirically was challenged by Galileo's more dynamic approach. In particular, Galileo became fascinated by the study of motion, which would later lead to his revolutionary ideas about the laws of physics. At the University of Pisa, Galileo struggled to reconcile his personal intellectual ambitions with the prevailing academic norms. Though he was appointed to the chair of mathematics at the university in 1589, his time there was short-lived. In part, this was due to his unconventional methods and the tension between his ideas and the traditional academic authorities. Galileo's conflict with the established scientific community became evident when he conducted his famous experiments with falling bodies. According to Aristotle, heavier objects fell faster than lighter ones, but Galileo's experiments demonstrated that, in the absence of air resistance, all objects fell at the same rate, regardless of their mass. This was a critical turning point in the development of modern physics, as Galileo's findings began to erode the credibility of ancient, static views of the universe. Galileo's dissatisfaction with the University of Pisa's traditional teaching led him to accept an invitation to teach at the University of Padua in 1592. This new position allowed him greater academic freedom and provided the perfect environment for his growing intellectual and experimental pursuits. Padua offered a more progressive and intellectually stimulating environment, and it was here that Galileo would make many of his most important discoveries. He became renowned not only as a teacher, but also as an innovative thinker, constantly pushing the boundaries of what was known about the natural world. His fame spread across Europe, and he began to gain attention from leading figures in the emerging scientific community, including Johannes Kepler and Tycho Brahe. It was also during this time that Galileo began to conduct his most important astronomical work, using the recently invented telescope to observe the heavens. The telescope, which Galileo famously improved and used for astronomical observations, would become his most iconic tool and a symbol of his genius. While he did not invent the telescope, Galileo's modifications to it, particularly his improvements to the lens, enabled him to achieve unprecedented magnifications, allowing him to see details in the night sky that had never been observed before. In 1609, after hearing of the invention of the telescope in Holland, Galileo built his own version, magnifying objects by up to 30 times. His improvements soon made the telescope an essential tool in the field of astronomy. It was through the telescope that Galileo would make some of his most revolutionary discoveries, including the moons of Jupiter, sunspots, and the rugged surface of the moon. These observations would have profound implications for the understanding of the cosmos and challenge the Aristotelian and Ptolemaic views that dominated medieval thought. Galileo's work with the telescope would soon lead to his most famous discovery, the four largest moons of Jupiter, which would later be named the Galilean moons in his honor. In 1610, using his improved telescope, Galileo observed that Jupiter was surrounded by four distinct celestial objects that appeared to orbit the planet. This was a groundbreaking discovery because it provided clear evidence that not all celestial bodies revolved around the Earth, as was previously believed. The discovery of these moons, which Galileo named Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, supported the Copernican heliocentric model, which proposed that the Earth and other planets revolved around the Sun. This finding directly challenged the long-standing geocentric model of the universe, which placed Earth at the center of all celestial motion. Galileo's observations of Jupiter's moons had profound implications, shifting the way humanity viewed its place in the cosmos and encouraging a move away from centuries of geocentric thinking. Galileo's fame spread quickly across Europe, following his discovery of the moons of Jupiter. He continued to refine his telescopic observations and made additional groundbreaking discoveries, including the observation of sunspots, which revealed that the Sun, contrary to the Aristotelian belief, was not a perfect, unchanging sphere. Instead, Galileo's observations showed that the Sun had blemishes, further undermining the prevailing ideas of the time. His observations of the moon's surface also contradicted the notion of celestial perfection, as he documented its rough, cratered surface, which was a stark contrast to the smooth, flawless spheres imagined by Aristotle and Ptolemy. These discoveries, combined with his support for the heliocentric model, set Galileo on a collision course with the powerful religious institutions of his time. 2. Galileo's scientific beginnings, from mathematics to physics. Galileo's transition from mathematics to physics marked a crucial shift in his intellectual development. His early exposure to mathematics in Pisa laid the foundation for his later contributions to the natural sciences. However, Galileo's growing interest in the mechanics of the physical world would ultimately shape his career. One of his first major contributions was to the study of motion. Through experiments, Galileo began to challenge the Aristotelian view that motion was governed by a set of immutable laws. According to Aristotle, motion in the natural world required a constant force to maintain it, a theory that had held sway for centuries. Galileo's investigations, however, began to demonstrate that motion could be understood through a much simpler principle, the concept of inertia, a critical idea that would later be fundamental to Newton's laws of motion. In 1589, Galileo took up a position at the University of Pisa, where he began his study of motion. The university, at the time, was an intellectual hub in Italy, but it remained grounded in medieval scholasticism, focusing on Aristotle's teachings. Galileo's early work challenged the prevailing notions of motion, especially the idea that heavier objects fell faster than lighter ones. He conducted an experiment, dropping different objects from the Leaning Tower of Pisa to test Aristotle's theory. While it is debated whether he actually performed the experiment at the tower, the significance of his idea cannot be overstated. Galileo argued that all objects fall at the same rate, regardless of mass, when air resistance is removed. This observation would lay the groundwork for the later development of the law of free fall and the principles of kinematics. Galileo's work on motion, particularly his concept of uniform acceleration, was pivotal in breaking away from centuries-old beliefs about the nature of motion. His experiments and mathematical models of motion illustrated that objects accelerated at a constant rate, a concept that was antithetical to Aristotle's belief in natural motion. Galileo's insights into acceleration and uniform motion were ahead of their time, and they played a key role in shaping the future of physics. However, his work was not without controversy. Galileo's insistence on conducting experiments and using mathematics to explain natural phenomena was in stark contrast to the methods employed by the Aristotelian scholars, who relied more on logical reasoning than empirical evidence. His ideas, which were grounded in observation and experimentation, marked a turning point in the development of the scientific method, emphasizing the importance of empirical data over abstract reasoning. Galileo's insights into motion and acceleration laid the groundwork for later scientific advancements, including the work of Isaac Newton. While Galileo did not fully develop the laws of motion as Newton would, his ideas about uniform motion and acceleration provided the essential foundation for Newton's work. In particular, Galileo's recognition that a constant force could produce a uniform motion paved the way for the formulation of Newton's first law of motion, which would later become a cornerstone of classical mechanics. In many ways, Galileo's theories anticipated modern physics, and his commitment to mathematical modeling and empirical observation would inspire future generations of scientists to explore the natural world in new and more rigorous ways. At the University of Padua, Galileo continued to explore the laws of motion and further refine his experimental techniques. He built several devices, such as the water clock and the improved thermometer, that allowed him to measure motion and time with unprecedented precision. These devices helped Galileo make critical observations about the behavior of moving objects, including the nature of projectile motion. Galileo's studies of projectiles, such as cannonballs, led him to formulate his theory of parabolic motion, which described the curved trajectory of a projectile. His work on projectile motion was a major advancement in the study of mechanics and would later be incorporated into Newtonian physics. Galileo also studied the properties of pendulums, leading to his discovery that the period of a pendulum is independent of its amplitude. This finding became crucial to the development of accurate timekeeping devices, and it further illustrated Galileo's innovative approach to scientific inquiry. As Galileo's reputation grew, he began to receive commissions for his work from various Italian courts and wealthy patrons. His influence expanded beyond academia, and he found himself engaged in correspondence with leading scientists of the time, such as Johannes Kepler. The exchange of ideas between Galileo and Kepler was particularly fruitful, as the two men had a shared interest in the heliocentric model of the universe. Galileo's observations, particularly his work with the telescope, provided key evidence that supported the Copernican model, which argued that the Earth and other planets revolve around the Sun, rather than the Earth being at the center of the universe. However, Galileo's increasing fame and his willingness to challenge the Church's teachings would eventually put him at odds with religious authorities, setting the stage for his infamous conflict with the Catholic Church. Galileo's work in the early 1600s marked the height of his influence in the scientific community. His contributions to the study of motion and mechanics laid the groundwork for many of the ideas that would shape modern physics. Through careful observation, experimentation, and the use of mathematics, Galileo developed groundbreaking theories that challenged the accepted views of the time. His revolutionary approach to science, based on empirical evidence and mathematical reasoning, would eventually help bring about the scientific revolution, transforming humanity's understanding of the natural world and shaping the future of scientific inquiry. 3. The telescope, Galileo's groundbreaking innovation. Galileo Galilei's impact on science would not be complete without his work with the telescope. Although Galileo did not invent the telescope, his improvements to the device, along with his application of it to astronomy, revolutionized the way humans understood the cosmos. In 1609, after hearing of a device invented in the Netherlands that allowed distant objects to be magnified, Galileo immediately set out to improve upon it. At the time, the telescope was capable of magnifying objects by only a factor 3, but Galileo's skill as a scientist and inventor allowed him to craft a telescope that magnified objects by as much as 30 times, greatly improving its practical use for astronomical observation. Galileo's improvements turned the telescope into an invaluable tool for observing distant stars, planets, and other celestial phenomena. Upon hearing of the Dutch invention, Galileo's interest was piqued by the possibilities it offered for enhancing his astronomical research. Although the telescope was initially used by military engineers to survey the terrain and find distant ships at sea, Galileo saw it as a key to unlocking the mysteries of the heavens. His modifications to the design, particularly improvements to the lenses, provided clearer, more magnified images than had ever been seen before. Galileo's interest in astronomy had already led him to an early fascination with the works of Copernicus, and he recognized the telescope as a potential tool to further the Copernican heliocentric model, which proposed that the Earth and the other planets orbited the Sun. Galileo's ambition was to gather empirical evidence that would challenge the Ptolemaic geocentric model, which held that the Earth was at the center of the universe. With his newly improved telescope, Galileo set about making observations that would forever alter humanity's understanding of the cosmos. Galileo's first astronomical observations with the telescope were nothing short of groundbreaking. In 1609, he turned his new instrument toward the night sky, and what he discovered would shake the very foundation of traditional astronomy. One of his earliest observations was of the moon, which, through the telescope, appeared to have a rough and uneven surface, filled with mountains and craters. This discovery was revolutionary, as the prevailing belief at the time, supported by Aristotle, held that the heavens were perfect and unchanging, consisting of smooth, ethereal spheres. Galileo's observations of the moon challenged this idea, suggesting instead that the moon was a physical object with imperfections, much like the Earth itself. This finding marked a key moment in the unraveling of ancient cosmological ideas and provided the first concrete evidence that celestial bodies were not perfect spheres. The implications of Galileo's discoveries extended far beyond the surface of the moon. Using his telescope, Galileo began to observe the stars and planets in unprecedented detail. One of his most famous discoveries was the observation of Jupiter's moons, which he first recorded in 1610. Galileo observed 4 distinct objects orbiting Jupiter, and upon further study, he realized that these objects were moons, which he named Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, now collectively known as the Galilean moons. This discovery was profound for several reasons. Not only did it provide evidence that not all celestial bodies orbited the Earth, as the Ptolemaic system suggested, but it also supported the heliocentric model of the universe proposed by Copernicus. By observing these moons, Galileo provided direct evidence that there were objects in the heavens that did not follow the geocentric model, but instead orbited a planet other than the Earth, fundamentally altering the prevailing understanding of the solar system. Galileo's observations of Jupiter and its moons were a powerful blow to the geocentric model of the universe. By showing that Jupiter had its own moons, Galileo demonstrated that not everything in the universe revolved around the Earth. This evidence was crucial in challenging the Ptolemaic model, which placed the Earth at the center of the universe. Galileo's findings were not just a minor correction to the existing model. They were a radical departure from centuries of thought that had shaped the way humanity understood its place in the cosmos. By using the telescope to observe the moons of Jupiter, Galileo offered clear evidence that the universe was much more complex and far larger than anyone had previously imagined. This discovery lent strong support to the Copernican system, in which the Earth and the planets orbited the Sun, not the Earth at the center of everything. Galileo's observations, though simple by modern standards, were revolutionary at the time and set the stage for the acceptance of the heliocentric theory. In addition to the moons of Jupiter, Galileo also observed the phases of Venus, another key discovery that provided further evidence in favor of the Copernican model. He noticed that Venus went through a series of phases, much like the moon, which could not be explained by the geocentric model. According to the Ptolemaic system, Venus would not be able to exhibit these phases, as it was supposed to always be between the Earth and the Sun. However, under the heliocentric model, the phases of Venus made perfect sense. This observation, along with his discovery of Jupiter's moons, became critical pieces of evidence that Galileo presented to support the Copernican theory. His findings in the early 1610s were part of a series of observations that shook the foundations of traditional astronomy and began to shift the scientific consensus toward a heliocentric view of the solar system. While Galileo's work with the telescope earned him widespread acclaim from the scientific community, it also brought him into conflict with religious authorities. His observations contradicted not only the traditional Aristotelian views of the heavens, but also the teachings of the Catholic Church. The Church, which had adopted the Ptolemaic system as part of its religious doctrine, could not easily accept the implications of Galileo's discoveries. His support of the Copernican system and his insistence on using observational evidence to back his claims put him at odds with the powerful forces of religious orthodoxy, setting the stage for the later trial and condemnation of Galileo by the Inquisition. Despite this opposition, Galileo's work marked a turning point in the history of astronomy, establishing the telescope as a critical instrument for scientific inquiry and setting the stage for future discoveries that would expand humanity's understanding of the universe. For the moons of Jupiter, Galileo's discovery of the Galilean satellites. Galileo's discovery of the moons of Jupiter in 1610 stands as one of the most significant moments in the history of astronomy. Using his improved telescope, Galileo turned his gaze toward Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, and observed a group of small celestial bodies orbiting it. What he found would go on to reshape the entire understanding of the universe and offer powerful evidence in favor of the heliocentric model of the cosmos. Galileo had long been a proponent of the Copernican system, which suggested that the Earth and the other planets orbited the Sun, rather than the Earth being at the center of the universe. However, the geocentric model, which placed the Earth at the center, was deeply entrenched in both scientific and religious thought. Galileo's observations of Jupiter's moons provided a new kind of evidence, one that was irrefutable and visible to anyone with a telescope. In January 1610, Galileo made his first observation of the moons orbiting Jupiter. He noted that there were 4 objects moving in a regular pattern around the planet. At first, Galileo thought these objects might be stars, but further observation revealed their motion was not consistent with the fixed stars. Over the next few nights, Galileo meticulously tracked the movement of these objects and realized they were, in fact, moons that were orbiting Jupiter. These moons did not follow the Earth, nor did they revolve around the Sun in the same way that the planets did. Instead, they orbited a different celestial body entirely. Galileo dubbed them the Medicean stars, after the powerful Medici family, who were his patrons, though they would later come to be known as the Galilean moons. Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. The discovery of these moons was profound for several reasons. First, it provided direct evidence that not all celestial bodies orbited the Earth, as the geocentric model suggested. According to this model, everything in the heavens was believed to revolve around the Earth, but Galileo's observation of Jupiter's moons contradicted this idea. These moons clearly orbited a body other than the Earth, challenging the foundational assumptions of the Ptolemaic system. More importantly, the moons of Jupiter seemed to follow a similar pattern to the Earth's moon, providing a strong argument for a heliocentric model in which the planets revolved around the Sun. Galileo's observations offered tangible evidence that the geocentric model was flawed, and his findings would ultimately support the broader Copernican theory that the Earth was not at the center of the universe. As Galileo continued to track the motion of Jupiter's moons, he realized that they moved in a predictable and regular pattern. This was crucial because it meant that their motion could be explained by natural laws, just as the motion of the Earth and the other planets could be explained. Galileo's meticulous observations led him to conclude that these moons were revolving around Jupiter at different speeds, but all in an orderly fashion. This finding further demonstrated that celestial bodies followed specific, calculable paths, contradicting the older belief that the heavens were composed of ethereal, unchanging bodies. The regularity of the moon's orbits also offered an important clue in the development of modern astronomy. It showed that motion in the heavens was not random, but governed by the same physical laws that govern motion on Earth. In addition to their implications for the geocentric model, Galileo's discovery of Jupiter's moons also had a profound impact on the Copernican theory. One of the main tenets of the Copernican system was that the Earth was just another planet orbiting the Sun. However, the discovery of the moons around Jupiter challenged the notion that all celestial bodies must revolve around the Earth. If a planet like Jupiter could have its own moons, Then the Earth's central position in the universe was further called into question. Galileo's work provided strong empirical evidence that the Earth was not the center of everything, and that the Sun, rather than the Earth, was the focal point of the solar system. This discovery would later be one of the key pieces of evidence used to advocate for the Copernican system over the geocentric model, eventually leading to the broader acceptance of heliocentrism. Galileo's findings were not without controversy, as his work continued to undermine the geocentric view of the universe. He found himself in direct conflict with the Church. The Catholic Church had long endorsed the Ptolemaic system, and the heliocentric model, which placed the Sun at the center of the universe, was considered heretical. Galileo's public support for Copernicus and his growing body of evidence for the heliocentric theory led to increasing tension with church authorities. In 1616, the Inquisition condemned the Copernican system, declaring that it was formally heretical because it appeared to contradict the scriptures. Galileo, however, remained steadfast in his support of the heliocentric model, seeing his observations as irrefutable evidence of the sun-centered universe. Despite mounting pressure from the Church, Galileo continued his work, knowing that his discoveries were laying the groundwork for a new era in science. Galileo's observations of Jupiter's moons and the implications of their motion reverberated far beyond the scientific community. His work provided the first clear empirical evidence that could not be easily dismissed, and it began to shift public opinion about the structure of the universe. As more astronomers began to use telescopes, Galileo's findings were confirmed and expanded upon, leading to further discoveries that supported the heliocentric model. However, the implications of Galileo's work went beyond astronomy. By demonstrating that the motion of celestial bodies could be understood through observation and mathematics, Galileo helped establish a new paradigm for scientific inquiry. His emphasis on empirical evidence and experimentation would later become a cornerstone of modern science, inspiring future generations of scientists to adopt a more rigorous and evidence-based approach to understanding the natural world. 5. Sunspots and the nature of the Sun. Galileo's observations. Galileo Galilei's study of the Sun, and in particular his observations of sunspots, marked a significant challenge to the long-held belief in the perfection of celestial bodies. According to the Aristotelian view, the heavens were considered to be perfect and immutable, consisting of unchanging, flawless spheres that moved in circular orbits. This was in sharp contrast to the natural, imperfect world of the Earth, which was subject to change and decay. The celestial realm, according to Aristotle, was a domain of divine perfection, and the Sun, like the other heavenly bodies, was thought to be a perfect, unblemished sphere. However, Galileo's careful observations of the Sun through his telescope would soon undermine this long-standing view and contribute to the growing body of evidence supporting the heliocentric model of the universe. In 1610, Galileo turned his newly improved telescope toward the Sun, seeking to understand its nature in greater detail. What he observed stunned him. Rather than a smooth, perfect, and unchanging surface, Galileo saw spots on the Sun's face, irregular, dark patches that seemed to move across the Sun's surface as it rotated. These sunspots were not a new discovery. Earlier astronomers had noted their existence, but Galileo was the first to make systematic and accurate observations of them. By observing the Sun through a telescope, Galileo was able to document the movement of sunspots and study their patterns over time. His findings revealed that the Sun, contrary to the Aristotelian belief, was not a perfect, flawless sphere, but rather a dynamic, changing body, subject to the same processes of imperfection and change as the Earth and other planets. Galileo's observations of sunspots had profound implications for both astronomy and the philosophy of nature. They directly contradicted the traditional view of the heavens as being composed of perfect, immutable spheres. If the Sun, a central and important celestial body, could have imperfections, this would suggest that the heavens were not as perfect as once believed. Galileo's work on sunspots was crucial because it revealed that celestial bodies, like the Earth, could undergo changes and exhibit imperfections. The sunspots, which appeared to rotate with the Sun, were indicative of the Sun's rotation on its axis. Galileo's careful tracking of the spot's movement over time provided strong evidence for the sun's rotation, which was another significant blow to the Aristotelian view of the cosmos, which held that the heavens were unchanging and unperturbed by the laws of nature that governed the earth. Moreover, Galileo's observations of the sun and sunspots helped further disprove the Ptolemaic system, which posited that the earth was at the center of the universe. Under the Ptolemaic view, the sun and other celestial bodies were supposed to revolve around the earth. But Galileo's sunspot observations indicated that the sun was not a distant, perfect sphere but a dynamic body in motion, subject to the same forces of nature as the earth itself. This finding lent additional credibility to the Copernican heliocentric model, which proposed that the earth and other planets orbited the sun. Galileo's discovery was part of a broader body of evidence that began to shift the scientific consensus away from the earth-centered universe of the Ptolemaic system and towards a sun-centered cosmos. Galileo's work on sunspots also raised questions about the methods used to study the heavens. His insistence on using the telescope as a tool for direct observation of celestial phenomena was a significant departure from the traditional methods of astronomy, which relied primarily on naked-eye observations and theoretical reasoning. Galileo's careful, systematic observations through the telescope allowed him to collect empirical evidence that was not based on abstract theories or philosophical arguments. This approach to scientific inquiry, emphasizing direct observation and experimentation, became a cornerstone of the scientific method and helped to establish Galileo as a key figure in the scientific revolution. His work demonstrated that the universe could be understood through careful observation and the application of reason, laying the foundation for future developments in physics, astronomy, and other scientific fields. Galileo's observations of sunspots were not without controversy, however. His findings clashed with the traditional Aristotelian worldview, which held that celestial bodies were perfect and eternal. The discovery of imperfections on the sun challenged the very concept of celestial perfection, and it was met with resistance by many who still adhered to the classical ideas of the heavens. Moreover, Galileo's growing support for the Copernican heliocentric model, which was at odds with the geocentric model supported by the Catholic Church, made him a target for religious authorities. In 1616, the Church issued a decree condemning the heliocentric model as formally heretical because it seemed to contradict certain biblical passages. Despite these challenges, Galileo remained steadfast in his belief that the evidence from his observations supported the Copernican system, and he continued to publish his findings, pushing the boundaries of accepted scientific thought. Galileo's work on sunspots had broader implications beyond astronomy. By challenging the belief in the perfection of the heavens, Galileo helped to open the door for a more dynamic and empirical approach to understanding the natural world. His use of the telescope, along with his methodical approach to observation, was an important step in the development of modern science. Galileo's insistence on observing the sun and other celestial bodies through the telescope, rather than relying solely on theoretical models, helped to establish a new standard for scientific inquiry. The importance of empirical data and direct observation, principles that Galileo championed, which shaped the future of science for centuries to come, influencing not only astronomy, but also fields like physics, biology, and chemistry. His work on sunspots is a testament to the power of observation in uncovering the mysteries of the universe, and it marked a key moment in the evolution of scientific thought. 6. Galileo's advocacy for the Copernican system, conflict with the Church. Galileo Galilei's advocacy for the Copernican heliocentric model of the solar system was one of the most controversial aspects of his career. The geocentric model, which placed the Earth at the center of the universe, had been the accepted view for centuries, supported not only by ancient philosophy, but also by the Catholic Church. In the late 16th century, the Copernican system, which proposed that the Earth and other planets orbited the Sun, was gaining traction among astronomers and scientists. Galileo, a passionate advocate for the heliocentric model, was among the first to present empirical evidence in its favor, making him a central figure in the shift away from the traditional geocentric worldview. However, Galileo's support for Copernicus, particularly in the face of mounting opposition from religious authorities, would lead him into direct conflict with the Catholic Church and set the stage for his eventual trial and condemnation. Galileo's commitment to the Copernican system was rooted in his belief that scientific inquiry should be based on empirical evidence rather than theological or philosophical dogma. The Ptolemaic model of the universe, which placed the Earth at the center, had been the dominant view for over 1,000 years. Supported by the Church, this model was not only accepted by scholars, but was also intertwined with religious teachings. The geocentric system was seen as a reflection of mankind's special place in God's creation, and challenging it was considered a direct threat to religious authority. Galileo's observations, particularly his discovery of the moons of Jupiter and the phases of Venus, provided clear evidence that the heliocentric model was more consistent with the observed motions of the planets. For Galileo, these discoveries were undeniable proof that the Sun, rather than the Earth, occupied the center of the solar system. In 1610, Galileo published his groundbreaking book Sidereus Nuncius, Starry Messenger, in which he detailed his astronomical observations made with the telescope. The book presented evidence for the heliocentric model, including his observations of the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and the imperfections on the Sun. Although the book was well received in many parts of Europe, it also attracted the attention of the Church, which saw Galileo's findings as a challenge to both the traditional Aristotelian view of the heavens and the Church's doctrine. The Copernican system was not officially endorsed by the Church, and in 1616, the Inquisition issued a decree stating that the heliocentric theory was formally heretical because it appeared to contradict certain biblical passages. The Church's opposition to the Copernican system and Galileo's growing influence as a proponent of heliocentrism set the stage for a confrontation that would have profound consequences for Galileo and for the development of science. Despite the Church's condemnation of the Copernican system, Galileo continued to advocate for it. In his writings, he argued that the Bible should not be interpreted literally when it came to scientific matters. Galileo believed that the scriptures were written for the salvation of souls, not to teach scientific truths, and he maintained that the natural world could be understood through observation and reason. In his famous letter to the Grand Duchess Christina of Tuscany, Galileo argued that the teachings of the Bible and the evidence of nature should not be in conflict, and that the pursuit of scientific knowledge was not opposed to the Christian faith. This was a deeply controversial position, as it challenged the Church's authority over both religious and scientific matters. Galileo's advocacy for the Copernican system, combined with his willingness to publicly criticize the Church's stance, led to growing tensions between him and religious authorities. The conflict between Galileo and the Church came to a head in 1632 with the publication of his book Dialogo sopra I do, Massimi Sistemi del Mondo, Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems. In this work, Galileo presented a detailed comparison of the geocentric and heliocentric models, using a conversational format to explore the strengths and weaknesses of each system. The book was an open endorsement of the Copernican system, and its publication reignited the controversy surrounding Galileo's support for heliocentrism. The Church, which had already condemned the heliocentric theory in 1616, viewed Galileo's dialogue as a direct challenge to its authority. In 1633, Galileo was summoned to Rome to stand trial for heresy, charged with teaching the Copernican system as a fact rather than as a theory. The trial was a momentous event in the history of science, as it represented the Church's attempt to suppress scientific ideas that contradicted its teachings. During his trial, Galileo was forced to recant his support for the heliocentric model. Although he maintained his belief in the Copernican system, he publicly acknowledged that he had erred in presenting it as fact, agreeing to cease teaching it. Galileo was found guilty of heresy and was sentenced to house arrest for the remainder of his life. The dialogue was banned, and Galileo's books were placed on the Church's list of prohibited texts. Despite this, Galileo's influence on the development of science was far from diminished. His ideas about motion, the use of telescopes in astronomy, and the importance of empirical observation continued to shape the future of scientific inquiry. Even under house arrest, Galileo continued to work and write, producing his seminal work Discourses and Mathematical Demonstrations relating to two new sciences in 1638, which laid the foundations for modern physics. Galileo's trial and condemnation by the Church were a pivotal moment in the history of science. While the Church sought to silence him, Galileo's work had already inspired a new generation of scientists, many of whom continued to build upon his ideas. The trial marked the beginning of a shift in the relationship between science and religion, one that would continue to evolve over the following centuries. In many ways, Galileo's conflict with the Church symbolized a broader tension between religious authority and the emerging scientific worldview. His steadfast belief in the importance of evidence-based inquiry and his willingness to stand up for his ideas, even in the face of immense personal risk, made him a symbol of intellectual courage and the struggle for scientific freedom. Despite the Church's condemnation, Galileo's contributions to science continued to influence future generations. His work on motion, his development of the scientific method, and his pioneering use of the telescope had lasting effects on the fields of astronomy and physics. The Copernican system, though initially rejected by the Church, would later be widely accepted, and Galileo's name would come to symbolize the triumph of reason and observation over dogma and superstition. In the years following his death, Galileo's reputation was restored, and he was posthumously vindicated by the Church. Today, Galileo is celebrated as one of the greatest figures in the history of science, and his legacy continues to inspire scientists and thinkers around the world. 7. The Inquisition in Galileo's trial, a confrontation with authority. The trial of Galileo Galilei by the Roman Catholic Inquisition in 1633 is one of the most significant episodes in the history of science, symbolizing the profound conflict between emerging scientific thought and religious authority. At the heart of the trial was Galileo's steadfast advocacy for the Copernican heliocentric model, which placed the sun at the center of the universe, rather than the Earth. This theory, which Galileo had championed with empirical evidence gathered through his revolutionary telescopic observations, had already been condemned by the Church in 1616. In spite of the Church's warnings, Galileo continued to teach, write, and publish works supporting the heliocentric model, most notably his 1632 book Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, which advocated for the Copernican system as the superior model of the cosmos. This book was a catalyst for his trial, as it was seen by the Inquisition as a blatant defiance of the Church's authority over both spiritual and scientific matters. Galileo's Dialogue presented the geocentric and heliocentric models through a fictionalized conversation between three characters, with the protagonist named Salviati, arguing in favor of the Copernican system. The book was widely read and gained considerable attention, including from religious authorities. The Inquisition, having already condemned the Copernican theory as formally heretical in 1616, saw Galileo's book as an explicit challenge to their religious interpretation of the universe. The Dialogue's format, combined with Galileo's firm stance on heliocentrism, was viewed as an attempt to undermine Church doctrine. Galileo had long maintained that the Earth's motion around the sun was not in conflict with Scripture, and he believed that the Bible was not meant to be interpreted literally in matters of science. He argued that the natural world should be understood through observation and reason, and that scientific truths, when discovered, could not be at odds with faith. In 1633, Galileo was summoned to Rome to stand trial. His trial was a deeply political and religious event, with implications far beyond his own fate. The Inquisition was tasked with determining whether Galileo's support for the Copernican system was heretical, as it contradicted the Church's teachings. Despite the mounting evidence Galileo had gathered through his telescope, including his observations of Jupiter's moons and the phases of Venus, which strongly supported the heliocentric model, the Church remained resolute in its belief that the Earth occupied a central and unchanging place in the universe. The theological argument against heliocentrism was that it appeared to contradict certain biblical passages that suggested the Earth was stationary and at the center of creation. Galileo's insistence on using scientific reasoning to question these teachings put him directly in opposition to the Church's interpretation of the Scriptures. The trial was a tense and complicated process. Galileo was interrogated by the Inquisition and faced a series of accusations, including the charge of teaching and writing in favor of the heliocentric model, despite its condemnation by the Church. Galileo, ever the pragmatist, understood the severity of the situation and agreed to appear before the Inquisition. In a bid to avoid further escalation, he chose to defend himself in a cautious manner. While he had long been confident in the validity of the Copernican theory, during the trial, Galileo was forced to concede that he had overstepped the bounds of what was acceptable in terms of public advocacy for the heliocentric model. In his defense, he argued that the Copernican theory was simply a mathematical model and not necessarily the literal truth. Galileo tried to downplay his own advocacy of the heliocentric system, suggesting that he had presented it as a hypothetical theory rather than an undeniable truth. In the end, Galileo's legal defense did little to save him. The trial concluded with a verdict of guilty, and Galileo was sentenced to house arrest for the remainder of his life. The Church ruled that he must recant his support for the heliocentric theory, and he was prohibited from teaching or writing in favor of it. In addition, his dialogue was banned, and all copies of the book were ordered to be burned. Despite his public recantation, Galileo's personal belief in the Copernican system remained unchanged. He had, however, been forced to submit to the authority of the Church, recognizing that his defense of heliocentrism posed a serious threat to his safety and freedom. The trial and its aftermath marked the end of Galileo's active public career, though he continued to work and write in the privacy of his home. Galileo's trial represented a profound moment in the history of science. The conflict between Galileo and the Catholic Church symbolized the tension between emerging scientific methods based on observation, experimentation, and reason, and the authority of religious institutions that sought to maintain control over both theological and scientific truths. The trial also highlighted the dangers faced by scientists who challenged prevailing views, particularly when those views were closely tied to religious doctrine. While the trial itself was a setback for Galileo, his ideas continued to influence future generations of scientists. The principles Galileo championed, empirical observation, the use of mathematics in understanding natural phenomena, and the importance of challenging established beliefs, would later become fundamental to the development of modern science. Galileo's work, although suppressed during his lifetime, set the stage for the eventual triumph of scientific inquiry over dogma. Despite his sentence of house arrest, Galileo continued to work on his research. He was not silenced by the trial, but rather, it seemed to embolden his commitment to scientific exploration. In the years following the trial, Galileo turned his attention to the study of mechanics and the laws of motion, which would become his final major contribution to science. His work during this period would lay the foundation for the development of classical physics, particularly the laws of motion that would later be formalized by Isaac Newton. Though his public career had been effectively ended, Galileo's intellectual legacy was far from over. His ideas continued to shape the course of scientific discovery and were eventually vindicated by later generations of scientists and scholars. Galileo's trial and its aftermath also had long-lasting consequences for the relationship between science and the Catholic Church. While the Church succeeded in suppressing Galileo's ideas for a time, the eventual acceptance of heliocentrism marked a shift in the way science was practiced and understood. Over time, the Church began to soften its stance on Galileo's work, and in 1992, the Vatican formally acknowledged its error in condemning him. Today, Galileo is celebrated as one of the greatest figures in the history of science, a martyr for intellectual freedom, whose work helped lay the foundations for the modern scientific revolution. His legacy is a testament to the power of reason, observation, and the courage to question authority in the pursuit of truth. 8. Galileo's later years, house arrest and continuing work. Following his trial and condemnation by the Roman Catholic Church in 1633, Galileo Galilei entered a period of enforced seclusion. spending the last years of his life under house arrest in his villa near Florence. Although his public career had come to an abrupt halt, Galileo's intellectual vigor did not fade. In fact, his years in confinement were marked by a remarkable resilience and productivity. Even though he had been silenced by the church, Galileo continued to work and write, undeterred by the restrictions placed upon him. It was during this time that Galileo produced his final masterpiece, Discourses and Mathematical Demonstrations Relating to Two New Sciences, 1638, a work that would become one of the most influential texts in the history of physics and a critical foundation for the later development of classical mechanics. Galileo's Two New Sciences was a groundbreaking treatise on motion and strength of materials, addressing topics such as the laws of motion, the behavior of objects in motion, and the mechanics of materials. Despite his restricted circumstances, Galileo was able to draw upon a lifetime of research and experimentations, along with his deep understanding of mathematics and physics, to develop his ideas. The treatise presented his thoughts on the nature of motion, including his work on accelerated motion, the principles of projectile motion, and his pioneering insights into the concept of inertia. These ideas would later influence the development of Newtonian physics and remain central to the study of mechanics in the centuries to follow. Although he had been forced to recant his support for the Copernican heliocentric model, Galileo never abandoned his belief in it. Even during his house arrest, Galileo continued to defend the heliocentric theory in his private correspondence and in his work. In fact, his time in seclusion allowed him to reflect on and refine his earlier discoveries, particularly those related to motion and mechanics. Galileo's ability to continue working under such harsh conditions speaks to his deep commitment to the pursuit of scientific truth. Despite his forced silence on the Copernican theory, Galileo's intellectual legacy continued to grow as he expanded on his earlier work in physics and astronomy, making new contributions to both fields during the later years of his life. Galileo's work during his house arrest would also address a key question that had been a subject of speculation for centuries: the nature of motion in the absence of resistance. In his studies of motion, Galileo formulated what we now recognize as the first law of motion, or the principle of inertia, which states that an object in motion will continue to move at a constant velocity unless acted upon by an external force. This was a radical departure from the Aristotelian view that objects in motion required a continuous force to keep them moving. Galileo's work on inertia was one of the key concepts that would later be built upon by Isaac Newton, forming the foundation of classical mechanics. Galileo's ability to develop and refine such profound ideas, even in the face of immense adversity, demonstrated his remarkable intellect and perseverance. During this time, Galileo also worked on his studies of the strength of materials, investigating the physical properties of objects and their structural integrity. His research in this field had important practical applications in engineering, particularly in the construction of buildings, bridges, and other structures. Galileo's understanding of the forces that act on materials was critical for advancing the study of engineering and materials science. Despite the constraints imposed on him by his house arrest, Galileo's work during these years had far-reaching consequences, influencing not only the fields of physics and astronomy, but also engineering and architecture. Though Galileo's output was constrained in some ways by his confinement, the fact that he continued to work on a wide range of scientific topics was a testament to his unyielding commitment to knowledge. In addition to his contributions to mechanics, Galileo also made significant strides in the study of the nature of light, optics, and the properties of lenses. His earlier improvements to the telescope had laid the groundwork for future developments in optical science, and his understanding of the behavior of light and lenses would go on to influence the design of telescopes and microscopes in the centuries that followed. Galileo's work in optics, along with his contributions to the study of motion, ensured that his influence would remain strong in the scientific world long after his death. While Galileo's house arrest isolated him from the wider scientific community, it also provided him with the time and space to think more deeply about the ideas that had occupied him throughout his life. He continued to refine his understanding of the natural world. Even if he could no longer engage in the same public debates or present his findings to the broader scientific community, Galileo's unrelenting curiosity and intellectual drive allowed him to continue making contributions to science, even when he was no longer able to participate in the public intellectual life that had once been his stage. His work during these years stands as a testament to the power of intellectual resilience and determination. Galileo's isolation also gave him an opportunity to reflect on the nature of science and the role of the scientist in society. Having faced censure and persecution by the Church, Galileo's writings during this period reveal a man who had come to understand the limits and the potential of scientific inquiry. He became increasingly convinced of the need for empirical evidence and the importance of mathematics in understanding the natural world. In his later years, Galileo wrote with a sense of urgency, aware that his time was limited and that the future of science depended on the principles he had developed and the ideas he had advocated for. His intellectual legacy, cultivated in the silence of house arrest, would continue to shape the future of science long after his death. Galileo's final years were marked by the completion of his great work Discourses and Mathematical Demonstrations relating to two new sciences, which was published in 1638. This work, which dealt with the principles of motion and the strength of materials, was Galileo's last major contribution to science and one of the most important texts in the history of physics. It provided the theoretical framework that would later be expanded upon by Isaac Newton and other scientists. Despite his physical decline, caused in part by the blindness that had afflicted him in his later years, Galileo remained a pivotal figure in the scientific revolution, and his work continued to inspire new generations of scientists. His refusal to bow to the pressures of dogma, his commitment to observation, and his deep belief in the power of reason ensured that Galileo would remain a towering figure in the history of science for centuries to come. 9. Galileo's influence on modern science. Building the foundations of physics. Galileo Galilei's contributions to science, particularly in the fields of physics and astronomy, have had a profound and lasting impact on the development of modern scientific thought. His insistence on empirical observation, experimentation, and mathematical reasoning laid the groundwork for what would later become the scientific method, a rigorous approach to understanding the natural world that has become the foundation of modern science. Galileo's work was pivotal not only in breaking away from centuries of religious and philosophical dogma, but also in inspiring future generations of scientists to adopt a more systematic and evidence-based approach to inquiry. His work fundamentally transformed the way we understand the universe, and his legacy continues to shape scientific fields ranging from physics and astronomy to engineering and materials science. One of Galileo's most significant contributions to science was his development of the concept of inertia, which would later become a cornerstone of Newtonian mechanics. Galileo's work on motion, particularly his studies of falling bodies and projectiles, demonstrated that motion could be understood through the principles of acceleration and uniform motion, rather than through abstract Aristotelian concepts. Galileo's ideas on motion, combined with his recognition that objects would continue moving unless acted upon by an external force, laid the foundation for Sir Isaac Newton's first law of motion. Newton, who is often regarded as the father of classical mechanics, built upon Galileo's work to develop a comprehensive theory of motion, which is still the framework for understanding physical systems today. Without Galileo's insights into inertia and motion, Newton's work would not have been possible, and the development of classical physics would have been delayed by centuries. Galileo's work in mechanics also paved the way for the development of the scientific study of materials. His studies of the strength of materials and the behavior of objects under stress were some of the earliest contributions to the field of engineering. Galileo's work on the properties of materials, such as his studies of the mechanical strength of beams and the behavior of objects under compression, had practical implications for architecture and engineering. These early insights into the strength of materials influenced the design and construction of buildings and structures, and his approach to understanding physical forces would later be expanded upon by engineers and scientists. In many ways, Galileo's contributions to engineering laid the foundation for modern structural design and materials science. In addition to his work in physics and engineering, Galileo's astronomical discoveries revolutionized our understanding of the universe. His use of the telescope and his subsequent observations of the Moon, Jupiter's moons, and the phases of Venus provided evidence for the heliocentric model of the solar system. These discoveries were crucial in challenging the long-standing Ptolemaic geocentric model and in supporting the Copernican system, which proposed that the Earth and other planets revolved around the Sun. The shift from a geocentric to a heliocentric understanding of the cosmos was a monumental moment in the history of science, and Galileo's observations were among the key pieces of evidence that helped to validate the Copernican theory. The acceptance of the heliocentric model laid the groundwork for future developments in astronomy and astrophysics, leading to the exploration of the solar system, the discovery of other galaxies, and the understanding of the larger universe in which we live. Galileo's use of the telescope also set the stage for the development of modern astronomy. His improvements to the telescope allowed astronomers to view distant celestial objects with unprecedented clarity, and his observations of the Moon, Jupiter's moons, and other planets helped to create the field of observational astronomy. Galileo's telescope, along with his meticulous documentation of celestial observations, helped to establish the idea that scientific knowledge should be based on empirical evidence gathered through direct observation, rather than abstract reasoning. This approach to scientific inquiry, which emphasized the importance of empirical data, would become a defining feature of modern science. Galileo's insistence on using the telescope to explore the heavens and his belief in the power of observation inspired future generations of astronomers to continue pushing the boundaries of what could be observed in the night sky, leading to major advancements in both observational techniques and theoretical models. Galileo's legacy also extended to the development of the scientific method. His commitment to observation and experimentation, as well as his rejection of untested theories and traditional dogma, helped to shape the modern scientific approach. The scientific method, which emphasizes hypothesis testing, experimentation, and empirical observation, is now the cornerstone of all scientific inquiry. Galileo's insistence on the importance of mathematics in describing the natural world also laid the foundation for the later development of mathematical physics. His belief that the universe was governed by rational, mathematical laws of nature led to the development of a new approach to science, one that relied on logic, reason, and quantifiable evidence rather than speculative philosophy or religious doctrine. This new approach to science was embraced by subsequent generations of scientists, from Kepler and Newton to Einstein and beyond, and continues to be the basis for scientific inquiry today. Galileo's work, particularly in the realms of physics and astronomy, has also influenced a wide range of other scientific disciplines. In addition to the direct impact his work had on physics, engineering, and astronomy, his emphasis on observation and empirical data has shaped fields such as biology, chemistry, and geology. Modern scientists across disciplines continue to build on the principles Galileo established, developing new technologies and refining scientific methods to explore the natural world in greater detail. The telescopes and microscopes of today, which allow scientists to peer into the farthest reaches of the cosmos and the smallest details of life, are direct descendants of Galileo's innovations. His contributions to the understanding of motion, material science, and celestial phenomena laid the groundwork for a wide range of scientific advancements, and his legacy continues to shape the way we approach the natural world. Galileo's influence on modern science extends beyond his specific discoveries and inventions. His life and work embody the values of intellectual courage, curiosity, and a relentless pursuit of truth. Galileo's willingness to challenge the established norms of his time, even in the face of persecution and personal risk, has made him a symbol of intellectual freedom and the power of reason. His enduring legacy is a reminder that science is not just about discovering facts, but about questioning assumptions, challenging authority, and seeking a deeper understanding of the universe. Galileo's work continues to inspire generations of scientists, philosophers, and thinkers to explore the mysteries of the natural world and to build upon the intellectual foundations he laid. His contributions to science and his steadfast belief in the power of observation and reason ensure that his legacy will endure for centuries to come. 10. Galileo's legacy in the context of the Renaissance. Galileo Galilei's contributions to science were deeply intertwined with the intellectual and cultural climate of the Renaissance, a period that saw the flourishing of arts, philosophy, and, crucially, scientific inquiry. The Renaissance, which spanned roughly from the 14th to the 17th century, was marked by a resurgence of interest in classical antiquity, the emergence of new ideas about the universe, and a shift away from medieval scholasticism. Galileo was both a product of this intellectual revolution and a key figure in shaping its course. His work in physics, astronomy, and the scientific method not only advanced the field of science, but also contributed to the broader cultural transformation that defined the Renaissance. By challenging ancient and religious authorities, Galileo helped to break the intellectual chains that had bound scientific thought for centuries, setting the stage for the modern scientific revolution. Galileo's relationships with other great Renaissance thinkers were crucial to his development as a scientist. One of his most important intellectual influences was Johannes Kepler, whose work on planetary motion would complement Galileo's discoveries. Kepler, a devout supporter of the heliocentric model, developed the laws of planetary motion, which showed that planets move in elliptical orbits, not perfect circles as Aristotle had suggested. Kepler's theories, though not fully embraced during Galileo's lifetime, were closely aligned with the Copernican system, which Galileo championed. While Galileo did not agree with Kepler's elliptical orbits, he adhered to the idea that planets moved in circular orbits. His work on Jupiter's moons and the phases of Venus laid the empirical groundwork for Kepler's later theoretical advancements. Despite their differences, both Galileo and Kepler shared a commitment to observation and mathematics, laying the foundation for the empirical science that would define modern physics and astronomy. Galileo also corresponded with Tycho Brahe, the Danish astronomer whose work in observational astronomy was unmatched at the time. Brahe, like Galileo, was a key figure in the scientific revolution, but he rejected the heliocentric model, instead proposing a geocentric system in which the planets revolved around the sun, but the sun itself revolved around the earth. This was a compromise between the Ptolemaic and Copernican models. While Galileo did not accept Brahe's model, their correspondence reveals the exchange of ideas that characterized the intellectual climate of the Renaissance. Galileo's ability to challenge established ideas, even those of leading figures like Brahe, demonstrates his intellectual independence and his commitment to empirical observation. His interactions with Brahe, Kepler, and other contemporaries reflected a growing network of thinkers who were reshaping the way humanity understood the universe, setting the stage for future advancements in science. In addition to his relationships with astronomers and physicists, Galileo's work was also influenced by his interactions with philosophers and mathematicians. His background in mathematics, especially his studies under the tutelage of his father, Vincenzo Galilei, provide him with the tools to approach scientific problems in a methodical and analytical way. Mathematics, which was often relegated to the realm of abstract thought during the Middle Ages, was at the heart of Galileo's work. His use of mathematical models to explain physical phenomena was revolutionary for his time and laid the groundwork for later developments in mathematical physics. Galileo's emphasis on mathematics as a language of nature helped to elevate the role of mathematics in science, making it an indispensable tool for understanding the world. His insistence that scientific theories must be supported by mathematical reasoning influenced later scientists, particularly Isaac Newton, who would build upon Galileo's ideas to develop his own laws of motion and gravitation. Galileo's work also intersected with the burgeoning field of experimental science, which became a hallmark of the Renaissance scientific revolution. The Renaissance period saw a shift from abstract speculation to empirical investigation, and Galileo was one of the most prominent advocates of the experimental method. His famous experiments with motion, such as those involving rolling balls and inclined planes, were designed to test hypotheses about the nature of motion and gravity. Galileo's ability to design experiments to test theoretical ideas was revolutionary. He understood that in order to uncover the secrets of the universe, scientists needed to observe, experiment, and measure the world around them. This approach, which emphasized observation and direct experimentation over theory and logic alone, became a cornerstone of the scientific method and would influence future generations of scientists, from Newton to modern researchers. The cultural and intellectual environment of the Renaissance also played a crucial role in Galileo's ability to pursue his groundbreaking work. The Renaissance was a time of intellectual ferment, and the flourishing of universities, libraries, and printing presses allowed for the rapid dissemination of new ideas. Galileo, like many of his contemporaries, benefited from the rapid spread of knowledge across Europe. His ability to communicate his ideas, both through his publications and his letters to other scientists, was integral to his success. His writings, particularly Sidereus Nuncius and Dialogue concerning the two chief world systems, were widely read and discussed by scholars across Europe, sparking debates that would shape the future of science. The printing press, which had been invented by Johannes Gutenberg in the 15th century, played a crucial role in the dissemination of scientific ideas, and Galileo's work was part of a broader movement of intellectual exchange that characterized the Renaissance. Galileo's work also contributed to the growing sense of a new world order that characterized the Renaissance. As the medieval worldview gave way to a more modern understanding of the universe, scientists like Galileo began to question old assumptions about the Earth's place in the cosmos. The heliocentric model, supported by Galileo's observations, helped to shift humanity's perspective from one of an Earth-centered universe to one in which the Earth was just another planet orbiting the Sun. This shift in perspective was not just a scientific breakthrough, but also a cultural and philosophical revolution. Galileo's work represented the triumph of reason, observation, and empirical evidence over tradition, superstition, and religious dogma. It marked the beginning of the scientific revolution, which would radically alter humanity's understanding of nature and its place in the cosmos. Galileo's legacy in the context of the Renaissance is one of intellectual courage and transformation. His willingness to challenge long-standing beliefs, his commitment to empirical evidence, and his ability to communicate his ideas to a wider audience made him one of the most important figures of the period. Galileo's work helped to lay the intellectual foundations for the scientific revolution that would follow, and his influence can be seen in the work of later scientists like Kepler, Newton, and Einstein. Today, Galileo is remembered not only as a great scientist, but also as a symbol of the power of reason and observation in the pursuit of truth. His legacy is a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity and to the transformative power of knowledge when it is pursued with intellectual honesty and integrity. 11. Galileo's impact on astronomy, the long-term effects of his discoveries. Galileo Galilei's contributions to the field of astronomy were transformative, and the long-term effects of his discoveries continue to shape our understanding of the universe today. Galileo's work did more than simply expand our knowledge of celestial objects. It fundamentally altered the way scientists approach the study of the cosmos. By using the telescope as an instrument for direct observation, Galileo was able to challenge the long-standing Ptolemaic geocentric model, which placed the Earth at the center of the universe. His discoveries, which included the observation of Jupiter's moons, the phases of Venus, and the rugged surface of the Moon, provided clear evidence that the universe was far more complex than previously thought. These observations helped to establish the Copernican heliocentric model of the solar system as the correct framework for understanding the motion of the planets, and they laid the foundation for the development of modern astronomy. Galileo's discovery of Jupiter's moons, in particular, had profound implications for the understanding of the solar system. When Galileo first observed the 4 largest moons of Jupiter in 1610, he was not only uncovering new celestial bodies, but also challenging the Ptolemaic worldview. In the geocentric model, the Earth was considered the center of the universe, and all celestial bodies were thought to orbit it. However, Galileo's observations revealed that Jupiter, a planet far from Earth, had its own system of moons orbiting it. This was a clear indication that not all celestial bodies revolved around the Earth, and it provided strong support for the Copernican heliocentric model, which placed the sun at the center of the solar system. Galileo's discovery helped to shift the paradigm of the time and open the door for further advancements in astronomy, leading to the eventual acceptance of the heliocentric theory and the realization that the universe was much more vast and complex than previously imagined. Galileo's observations of the phases of Venus were another key piece of evidence in support of the heliocentric model. In the geocentric model, Venus was thought to orbit the Earth, and it was assumed that its phases would resemble those of the Moon, which is always visible as a crescent or full sphere from Earth. However, Galileo's careful observations showed that Venus underwent phases similar to those of the Moon, ranging from crescent to full. This could only be explained if Venus was orbiting the Sun, as the heliocentric model suggested. Galileo's discovery of the phases of Venus provided compelling evidence for the Copernican system and helped to convince other astronomers and thinkers that the Earth was not the center of the universe. This observation would later become one of the critical arguments for the heliocentric model in the works of later scientists, including Johannes Kepler and Isaac Newton. Galileo's impact on the field of astronomy extended beyond his own discoveries. His advocacy for the use of the telescope to explore the heavens set a new standard for astronomical observation, and his meticulous documentation of celestial phenomena paved the way for future astronomers. Galileo's work inspired other scientists to adopt the telescope as a tool for studying the stars and planets, leading to a wave of discoveries that would continue into the 17th and 18th centuries. In particular, Galileo's use of the telescope in his observations of Jupiter's moons and the phases of Venus demonstrated the power of observational science, showing that the universe could be understood through empirical evidence rather than abstract speculation. His work helped to establish a new approach to astronomy, one based on direct observation, measurement, and the use of technology that remains central to the field today. In the long term, Galileo's discoveries were foundational for the later developments in astronomy. His observations helped to discredit the Ptolemaic system and provided support for the heliocentric model, which became the basis for later astronomical research. Galileo's work was crucial to the acceptance of the heliocentric theory, which was further refined by Johannes Kepler, who formulated the laws of planetary motion, and Isaac Newton, who later developed the laws of motion and universal gravitation. Galileo's contributions provided the empirical foundation upon which Kepler and Newton built their theories, and his work helped to inspire the development of modern physics and the study of the universe. His legacy can be seen in the ongoing exploration of the cosmos, from the development of telescopes capable of observing distant galaxies to the use of space probes that explore the outer reaches of the solar system. Galileo's influence on astronomy also extended to the development of the scientific community itself. By publishing his discoveries and sharing his observations, Galileo helped to establish the practice of scientific communication. His books, including Sidereus Nuncius, Starry Messenger, and Dialogue Concerning the Two Chief World Systems, set a precedent for the dissemination of scientific knowledge, and his use of the scientific method to test hypotheses and gather data helped to establish a new standard for scientific inquiry. Galileo's work was part of a broader movement that sought to replace speculative philosophy with empirical observation, and his contributions were pivotal in the rise of the scientific community as we know it today. The scientific community that emerged from the work of Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and others became the foundation for modern science, and their collaborative efforts set the stage for the rapid advancements in astronomy and other fields that would follow in the centuries to come. The impact of Galileo's discoveries also extended to the broader culture. His work challenged the traditional worldview that had been dominated by the Church and Aristotelian philosophy, and it helped to lay the intellectual foundations for the Enlightenment. Galileo's willingness to question established authorities and his commitment to observation and reason were key elements in the development of modern thought, and his work continues to inspire scientists, philosophers, and thinkers to this day. Galileo's discoveries also contributed to a broader cultural shift that valued empirical evidence over dogma, reason over superstition, and the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. His work helped to establish science as an independent discipline, distinct from theology and philosophy, and his legacy has had a lasting influence on the way we approach the study of the natural world. Galileo's contributions to astronomy not only transformed our understanding of the cosmos, but also marked the beginning of a new era in scientific exploration. His discoveries opened up new avenues of inquiry, from the study of planetary motion to the exploration of distant stars, and they laid the groundwork for the vast expansion of astronomical knowledge that would follow in the centuries after his death. Today, the field of astronomy is one of the most dynamic and rapidly advancing areas of science, with modern telescopes and space missions allowing us to observe galaxies billions of light-years away. Galileo's work continues to inspire and inform this exploration, ensuring that his legacy as the father of modern astronomy endures. His discoveries and methods continue to shape our understanding of the universe, making him one of the most influential figures in the history of science. 12. Galileo as a symbol. The struggle for intellectual freedom. Galileo Galilei's life and work transcended the boundaries of science and became a symbol of intellectual freedom and the struggle for truth against authority. His willingness to challenge the established scientific and religious paradigms of his time, even in the face of severe personal consequences, has made him a martyr for the cause of free thought and scientific inquiry. Galileo's story is not just one of scientific discovery, but also of intellectual courage, as he resisted the pressure from the Catholic Church and other authorities to silence his ideas. His conflict with the Church, culminating in his trial and condemnation, has come to symbolize the broader tension between scientific progress and the forces of dogma, superstition, and institutional power. Galileo's commitment to the pursuit of truth, based on empirical evidence and rational thought, set him apart from many of his contemporaries. During his time, the Church held considerable influence over intellectual life, and its support of the Ptolemaic geocentric model of the universe was deeply entrenched. Galileo's support for the Copernican heliocentric model, which placed the sun at the center of the universe, was seen as a direct challenge not only to scientific orthodoxy, but also to religious authority. The Church, which had long claimed authority over both spiritual and scientific matters, could not accept that its interpretations of the Bible and its teachings about the cosmos might be wrong. Galileo, however, remained steadfast in his belief that scientific truth could not be subordinated to theological or philosophical arguments. His refusal to abandon the heliocentric model, even when faced with the threat of persecution, made him a symbol of intellectual freedom. Galileo's willingness to challenge the status quo and his insistence on basing scientific inquiry on observation and experimentation helped to establish a new paradigm for the scientific method. In an era when philosophical and theological debates often dominated intellectual life, Galileo's approach marked a profound shift. He demonstrated that the natural world could be understood through careful observation, measurement, and logical reasoning, rather than through dogma or abstract speculation. This shift in approach to knowledge paved the way for the scientific revolution, which would transform not only astronomy and physics, but also other fields such as biology, chemistry, and geology. Galileo's work demonstrated the power of empirical evidence in uncovering the truth and contributed to the rise of a scientific community dedicated to the objective study of the natural world. Galileo's trial by the Inquisition in 1633 and his subsequent condemnation for heresy reinforced the image of Galileo as a victim of intellectual oppression. His public recantation of his support for the heliocentric model under the threat of torture and imprisonment did not reflect his true beliefs. He continued to support the Copernican system privately, but in the face of overwhelming pressure, he was forced to bow to the authority of the Church. This moment of forced submission is often viewed as a tragic episode in the history of science, as it underscores the struggle between the pursuit of knowledge and the constraints imposed by institutional power. Galileo's willingness to endure this humiliation for the sake of his ideas has contributed to his status as a symbol of scientific integrity and intellectual bravery. His story serves as a reminder of the personal cost of challenging entrenched authority in the pursuit of truth. Galileo's legacy as a symbol of intellectual freedom has endured long after his death. In the centuries following his trial, Galileo's work continued to inspire scientists, philosophers, and thinkers who sought to break free from the constraints of dogma and to pursue knowledge through empirical investigation and reason. Galileo's story is often cited as a cautionary tale about the dangers of censorship and the suppression of ideas, but it is also a story of triumph. The triumph of reason, evidence, and intellectual courage over ignorance and authoritarianism. Galileo's example has been embraced by generations of scientists who have followed in his footsteps, challenging established beliefs and pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. His work has been instrumental in shaping the development of modern science, and his enduring legacy is a testament to the power of intellectual freedom in advancing human understanding. Throughout history, Galileo's name has been invoked as a symbol of resistance to oppressive ideologies and the fight for the autonomy of the mind. In the context of the scientific revolution, Galileo is often seen as a martyr for reason, whose suffering at the hands of religious authorities highlighted the dangers of intertwining science with dogma. His story has been used as a rallying cry for scientists and intellectuals who face similar struggles in their own time. Galileo's life has become emblematic of the broader conflict between free inquiry and institutional control, and his example has inspired countless individuals to pursue knowledge, regardless of the obstacles they face. Galileo's contributions to science and his courageous defense of the scientific method have made him a hero of the Enlightenment and a lasting symbol of the power of human reason. The enduring power of Galileo's legacy can be seen in the way his ideas continue to shape the modern world. In the centuries since his trial, his work has been vindicated, and the Copernican heliocentric model, which Galileo had so fervently supported, is now a cornerstone of modern astronomy. Galileo's methods, which emphasized observation, experimentation, and mathematics, continue to guide scientific inquiry. His approach to the natural world, which sought to explain phenomena through evidence rather than theory alone, has become the standard for scientific investigation. Galileo's influence extends beyond astronomy and physics, as his emphasis on the importance of empirical evidence has shaped the methodologies of all branches of science, from biology to social sciences. His story is a testament to the transformative power of intellectual freedom and to the enduring struggle for truth in the face of institutional and ideological resistance. Galileo's martyrdom for scientific truth is especially relevant in today's world, where science often faces challenges from political, ideological, and religious forces. His life serves as an inspiration for modern scientists who, like Galileo, find themselves in opposition to established authorities or who must defend the integrity of their work against those who seek to suppress it. Galileo's legacy as a symbol of intellectual freedom is timeless, and his example continues to inspire those who fight for the pursuit of knowledge, truth, and reason. His work remains an enduring reminder that the quest for understanding the natural world is a noble and important endeavor, one that requires courage, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to intellectual integrity. 13. Galileo's philosophy of science. The role of observation and experimentation. Galileo Galilei's contributions to the philosophy of science were just as important as his empirical discoveries. His approach to understanding the natural world was grounded in a philosophy that emphasized observation, experimentation, and mathematical reasoning. At a time when abstract theorizing and reliance on ancient authorities dominated intellectual life, Galileo's method represented a radical shift toward empirical inquiry. By insisting that the natural world could be understood through direct observation and experimentation, Galileo helped to establish a new framework for scientific investigation that would become the foundation of modern science. His philosophy of science was built on the belief that knowledge must be based on evidence, on what can be observed and tested, rather than on philosophical speculations or religious dogma. Galileo's insistence on using the scientific method to understand the universe marked the beginning of a new era in scientific thought, one that would eventually lead to the development of the rigorous empirical approach we use today. Galileo's methodology was based on several key principles. First and foremost, he believed that the natural world could be understood through careful observation and experiment. Galileo was deeply dissatisfied with the reliance on ancient texts and theories, especially those of Aristotle and Ptolemy, which had been accepted for centuries without question. Rather than relying on philosophical reasoning alone, Galileo advocated for the direct observation of nature, whether through the naked eye or through the use of instruments like the telescope. His groundbreaking use of the telescope to observe the heavens was a prime example of this approach. Galileo was not content to simply accept the ideas of others. He sought to verify them through his own observations and experiments. This commitment to empirical evidence was a defining feature of his approach to science and laid the foundation for the scientific method used by later scientists, such as Isaac Newton, who would build upon Galileo's ideas to develop classical mechanics. Galileo's insistence on the importance of experimentation was another key element of his philosophy. He believed that scientific knowledge should not be based solely on theoretical reasoning, but on the results of experiments designed to test hypotheses. Galileo's famous experiments, such as those involving the motion of falling objects and the behavior of projectiles, were designed to gather empirical data that could be used to understand the laws of motion. For example, his work on falling bodies showed that, contrary to Aristotle's belief, all objects fall at the same rate regardless of their mass. This was a revolutionary idea that contradicted centuries of accepted wisdom. Galileo's method of conducting experiments and using mathematics to describe the results was a departure from the speculative methods of earlier philosophers and set the stage for the development of modern experimental science. His emphasis on observation and experimentation would later become a cornerstone of scientific practice across all disciplines. Mathematics was another key aspect of Galileo's philosophy of science. Galileo believed that the natural world was governed by mathematical laws, and that mathematics was the key to understanding the universe. In his famous statement, "The book of nature is written in the language of mathematics," Galileo expressed his belief that the laws of nature could be expressed through mathematical equations and models. This view was revolutionary for its time, as many scientists and philosophers still believed that the natural world could only be understood through qualitative reasoning and philosophical concepts. Galileo, however, argued that the universe was orderly and predictable, and that it could be described using mathematical principles. His work in mechanics, which involved the use of geometry and algebra to describe the motion of objects, was an early example of this mathematical approach. Galileo's insistence on the role of mathematics in science would later be adopted by Isaac Newton, whose laws of motion and theory of gravitation were based on mathematical principles. This approach to science laid the groundwork for the later development of physics and other scientific fields that rely heavily on mathematics to describe natural phenomena. In addition to his focus on empirical observation and mathematics, Galileo also believed in the importance of simplicity in scientific theories. He rejected the complex and convoluted explanations that were common among Aristotelian philosophers, arguing that the best scientific theories were those that provided simple and elegant explanations for natural phenomena. Galileo was influenced by the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, but he was critical of the overly complex systems of explanation that had been built upon Aristotle's ideas. Instead, Galileo sought to explain the natural world in the simplest terms possible, using basic principles of motion and mathematics. This emphasis on simplicity in scientific theory was a key part of Galileo's philosophy, and it would later influence the development of Newtonian physics, which emphasized the use of simple and elegant mathematical models to describe the laws of motion and gravity. Galileo's approach to science was also marked by his skepticism of authority. At a time when the works of ancient philosophers like Aristotle were considered to be authoritative and beyond question, Galileo challenged this reverence for ancient texts. He argued that science should not be based on the authority of ancient thinkers, but on the results of empirical observation and experimentation. Galileo was not afraid to challenge the ideas of Aristotle, Ptolemy, and other respected thinkers of the past, and he encouraged others to question established ideas. His willingness to challenge authority, whether it was in the form of ancient philosophers or religious institutions, was a key element of his philosophy and his approach to science. Galileo's skepticism of authority, coupled with his belief in the power of reason and evidence, set him apart from many of his contemporaries and helped to pave the way for the scientific revolution that would follow. Galileo's work also had significant philosophical implications beyond the realm of science. His insistence on the importance of observation and experimentation in understanding the natural world helped to establish the modern concept of scientific inquiry, which emphasizes evidence-based reasoning and the rejection of unfounded speculation. Galileo's philosophy of science also influenced the development of empiricism, which became a central tenet of modern philosophy. Thinkers like Francis Bacon, who developed the idea of the scientific method as a systematic way of gathering and analyzing data, were greatly influenced by Galileo's emphasis on observation and experimentation. Galileo's ideas about the role of mathematics in science, the importance of simplicity in scientific theories, and the rejection of authority in favor of reason and evidence laid the intellectual foundations for the rise of modern science and its methods. In the centuries since Galileo's time, his philosophy of science has continued to shape the way we approach scientific inquiry. His insistence on the use of observation, experimentation, and mathematics in understanding the natural world has become the cornerstone of the scientific method. Galileo's ideas about the importance of empirical evidence and the rejection of unfounded speculation continue to guide scientists today, and his work remains a central part of the intellectual history of modern science. Galileo's philosophy of science was not only a key part of his own intellectual legacy, but also a major influence on the development of scientific thought in the centuries to come. His commitment to reason, evidence, and simplicity in scientific inquiry continues to inspire scientists and thinkers who seek to understand the mysteries of the universe through careful observation and logical reasoning. 14. Galileo's personal life. The man behind the genius. Galileo Galilei's personal life, often overshadowed by his scientific achievements, was an integral part of his journey and played a role in shaping his character and his work. Born into a family of modest means, Galileo's early life was marked by both privilege and struggle. His father, Vincenzo Galilei, was a musician and a scholar who had a significant influence on his intellectual development. However, Galileo's family life was also marked by tension, particularly when Galileo chose to pursue a career in science rather than medicine, as his father had hoped. Galileo's decision to follow his own intellectual passions was not well received by his family, but it would ultimately shape the trajectory of his life and his contributions to science. His personal relationships, particularly with his children, would also play a significant role in his later years, as Galileo's life was shaped by both intellectual pursuits and personal struggles. Galileo's relationship with his father was complex. Vincenzo Galilei was a musician and a philosopher, and he had hoped his son would follow in his footsteps and pursue a career in medicine, a more practical and lucrative profession. Galileo, however, was more interested in mathematics and natural philosophy, which led to some friction between the two. While Vincenzo supported Galileo's intellectual pursuits to some extent, he was also critical of his son's choice of career, believing that mathematics and philosophy would not provide a stable future. Despite these tensions, Galileo's education under his father's guidance helped to shape his intellectual outlook, and the emphasis on critical thinking and mathematical reasoning that he inherited from Vincenzo would become central to Galileo's own approach to science. The early strain in their relationship likely contributed to Galileo's sense of independence and determination to chart his own course, even in the face of opposition. Galileo's personal life was also marked by his relationships with women. Although he never married, Galileo had a long-term relationship with Marina Gamba, a Venetian woman with whom he had 3 children. 2 daughters, Virginia and Livia, and a son, Vincenzio. Their relationship was not one of marriage, and Galileo's children were born outside of wedlock. The lack of formal marriage did not diminish the importance of his family to Galileo, especially in his later years. His daughters, Virginia and Livia, were placed in a convent due to the social norms of the time, and Galileo maintained close contact with them throughout his life. His son, Vincenzio, was sent to school and became a physician. Despite the challenges Galileo faced as a single father, his relationship with his children, particularly with his daughters, was a source of personal fulfillment and affection in his later years. The absence of a formal marriage and the challenges of raising children outside of the conventional social structure of his time added complexity to Galileo's personal life, but it did not detract from his deep love and concern for his children. Galileo's personal struggles were also reflected in his later years, when he faced declining health and eventual blindness. By the 1630s, Galileo had begun to experience problems with his eyesight, which worsened over time. His blindness, a devastating blow to a man whose work was centered on careful observation and experimentation, did not stop him from continuing his intellectual pursuits. Even as his vision failed, Galileo remained determined to finish his scientific work. His ability to work despite his physical decline is a testament to his resilience and dedication to his craft. In his final years, while under house arrest, Galileo continued to write and refine his theories, including his discourses and mathematical demonstrations relating to two new sciences. The loss of his eyesight did not diminish his intellectual sharpness or his passion for discovery, and his ability to persist in the face of such adversity is one of the most inspiring aspects of his character. The challenges Galileo faced in his personal life were also mirrored in his ongoing conflict with the Catholic Church. His support of the heliocentric model, combined with his increasingly vocal opposition to the Church's authority over science, put him at odds with religious authorities. Galileo's trial and condemnation for heresy in 1633 were a direct result of his personal commitment to scientific truth, even in the face of immense personal and professional risks. Despite the challenges he faced, Galileo remained committed to his scientific work, and his belief in the importance of observation and evidence over religious or philosophical dogma never wavered. The personal sacrifices Galileo made, from his strained relationship with his father to his ongoing conflict with the Church, highlight his dedication to the pursuit of knowledge and his willingness to endure hardship for the sake of intellectual freedom. Galileo's later years, marked by personal loss and physical decline, were a time of reflection as well as continued work. His work on mechanics, particularly the discourses and mathematical demonstrations relating to two new sciences, was completed during this period, and it would go on to have a lasting impact on the development of physics. During his house arrest, Galileo continued to refine his ideas and pass them on to others, often through correspondence with fellow scientists and intellectuals. Despite the physical and emotional toll of his personal circumstances, Galileo's intellectual energy remained undiminished. His dedication to science, his unwavering commitment to the scientific method, and his ability to persevere in the face of personal and professional adversity made him one of the most enduring figures in the history of science. Although Galileo's personal life was not without its difficulties, his relationships, particularly with his children and his contemporaries, played an important role in his work. His love for his daughters, especially Virginia, who would later become Sister Maria Celeste, and his ongoing efforts to support his son, Vincenzio, were sources of comfort in the later years of his life. Galileo's letters to his daughters, which have been preserved, reflect the deep affection he had for them, as well as his desire to see them succeed in their lives, even as they lived in the confines of a convent. His relationship with his contemporaries, including Johannes Kepler and other scientists, helped to foster the intellectual exchange that characterized the scientific revolution. Galileo's friendships and collaborations with other thinkers shaped his work and contributed to the rapid expansion of scientific knowledge during his lifetime. In the end, Galileo's personal life, though filled with struggles and challenges, was deeply intertwined with his scientific achievements. His relationships with family, friends, and colleagues, along with his personal resilience in the face of adversity, shaped the course of his work and left a lasting impact on the development of science. Galileo's determination to pursue his intellectual passions, despite the difficulties he faced, is a testament to his character and his unwavering commitment to the pursuit of truth. His legacy, both as a scientist and as a person, continues to inspire those who seek to understand the natural world and to push the boundaries of knowledge, even when faced with great personal and professional challenges. 15. Conclusion. Galileo's immortal legacy. Galileo Galilei's contributions to science, philosophy, and intellectual thought have left an indelible mark on the world. His work not only advanced the fields of physics, astronomy, and engineering, but also laid the philosophical and methodological groundwork for the scientific revolution. Despite facing immense personal, social, and institutional challenges, Galileo's unwavering commitment to empirical observation, experimentation, and mathematical reasoning made him a pivotal figure in the history of science. Today, Galileo is celebrated not only as one of the greatest scientists of all time, but also as a symbol of intellectual courage, freedom, and the power of reason over dogma. His legacy endures in the modern scientific method, in the continued pursuit of knowledge, and in the inspiring story of a man who challenged the status quo to change the world. Galileo's work fundamentally reshaped humanity's understanding of the universe. His observations with the telescope, from the moons of Jupiter to the phases of Venus, provided compelling evidence for the heliocentric model of the solar system, fundamentally altering the course of astronomy. His challenge to the geocentric model, which had dominated Western thought for over 1,000 years, helped to catalyze a paradigm shift that moved humanity from a view of the universe centered around the Earth to one in which the Earth was just another planet in a vast cosmos. Galileo's discoveries paved the way for the work of other great scientists, including Johannes Kepler, Isaac Newton, and Albert Einstein, whose own contributions would be built upon the foundation Galileo had established. In this sense, Galileo's legacy is both foundational and far-reaching, as his discoveries continue to shape modern science. Galileo's influence extended far beyond the field of astronomy. His work on mechanics, particularly his formulation of the laws of motion and his concept of inertia, laid the groundwork for the classical mechanics developed by Isaac Newton. His insistence that the natural world could be understood through mathematics and experimentation helped establish a new model for scientific inquiry that would dominate all of science for centuries. Galileo's work on the strength of materials, his development of early telescopes, and his studies of motion and acceleration were just as instrumental in advancing engineering and physics. His philosophical commitment to the idea that scientific truths must be based on observation rather than abstract reasoning or authority transformed the way future generations approach scientific problems. Galileo's legacy is, therefore, not just in the discoveries he made, but in the method by which he made them, through rigorous empirical investigation that would become the hallmark of modern science. Despite his groundbreaking work, Galileo's life was marked by struggle. His confrontation with the Catholic Church and the trial that led to his condemnation for heresy in 1633 were among the most significant events of his life. Though he was forced to recant his views publicly, Galileo continued to hold firm to his scientific convictions. His trial, which became a symbol of the tension between science and religious authority, cast a shadow over his later years, but it also helped to galvanize future generations of scientists. Galileo's story exemplified the personal cost of challenging entrenched power structures for the sake of knowledge and intellectual freedom. The eventual rehabilitation of Galileo by the Catholic Church in the 20th century was a long overdue acknowledgement of his scientific contributions, but his legacy was already firmly established long before then, as a figure who represented the triumph of reason over dogma. Galileo's impact extends beyond the sciences. His life and work embody the ideals of the Enlightenment and the broader movement of intellectual freedom that reshaped the Western world. Galileo's defiance of the Church's authority and his insistence on the supremacy of empirical evidence and reason inspired not only scientists, but also philosophers, political thinkers, and activists who fought for the freedom of thought and expression. His life serves as a reminder that the pursuit of knowledge often involves challenging established norms and defying powerful institutions. Galileo's legacy, therefore, is not only one of scientific discovery, but also one of intellectual resilience and the courage to seek truth, regardless of the obstacles faced along the way. The tools and methods Galileo developed for studying the natural world remain central to science today. His improvements to the telescope revolutionized observational astronomy, and his use of mathematical reasoning to describe natural phenomena set the stage for the development of physics as a quantitative science. The scientific method he championed, based on observation, experimentation, and mathematical reasoning, continues to be the cornerstone of scientific inquiry in all fields. Today, Galileo's influence is seen not only in the instruments and methods used by astronomers and physicists, but also in the way science is taught, practiced, and understood around the world. His work is a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Galileo's final years, spent under house arrest after his trial, were marked by his continued commitment to scientific inquiry despite his personal challenges. Even as his health deteriorated, and later as he faced blindness, Galileo remained focused on his intellectual work, writing his final masterpiece, Two New Sciences, which laid the foundation for classical mechanics. His ability to continue working despite these physical limitations demonstrates the strength of his intellectual resolve and his deep passion for discovery. Even in the face of adversity, Galileo never wavered in his belief that knowledge and reason were the guiding principles of science. His work in his later years remains a testament to the perseverance of the human spirit and the power of intellectual freedom, which enabled him to overcome personal hardship and make lasting contributions to the world of science. Galileo's legacy is not confined to the past. It is alive and well in the scientific work of today and the questions that continue to drive modern research. His life has inspired countless scientists, thinkers, and activists who continue to challenge the boundaries of knowledge and question the status quo. Whether in the study of the stars, the exploration of space, or the search for new physical laws, Galileo's work continues to resonate in the minds of those who seek to understand the universe and their place in it. Galileo's immortality lies in his unwavering dedication to science, his commitment to truth, and his belief in the power of observation, mathematics, and reason to unlock the mysteries of the world around us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legacy of Galileo Galilei. His discoveries and ideas changed the way we view the world and the universe. From challenging traditional beliefs to shaping the future of science, Galileo's contributions continue to inspire us today. We hope this documentary, backed by scientific research and expert analysis, has helped you understand his remarkable impact. Stay tuned for more insightful content, like this on BM Research, where we bring history and science to life with narrated stories and visuals. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more.